Good morning, everyone. It is coming up to 9 a.m. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. This morning, I wanted to talk to you about net zero. I think it's very poignant given everything that's going on currently with energy and petrol and targets and all the requirements around energy conservation, that we have a conversation about net zero and what that means. I am doing this from home. I do have a dog, and I'm just warning you now that my dog, I'm looking at her now, is very much looking out of the window and is probably getting ready to bark at any point. So if she does bark, I do apologize, but these are the joys of working from home. So as I've said before, when we've done these lives, who are we? We're MKL Innovation. We are a digital FM company. We carry out electrical compliance work, and we also install and implement IoT devices as well. The reason why we do that is we wanted to bring those two disciplines together to have technology at the core of our offering, but also the competency of electrical engineering. Now, we always do LinkedIn polls. We like to do polls. We like to ask people what they want to hear about. And one of the polls that we recently did was around net zero. I think from memory, what people were suggesting is they wanted to understand what net zero actually means, what it means to them, and how can they start. So that's what we're going to talk about. What is the best way to describe net zero? And the best way that I've had it described to me was from the national grid. And they say to think about it like a bath. You turn on the taps and you add more water. You pull out the plug and the water flows out. We all know how a bath works. Now, the amount of water in the bath depends on both the input from the taps and the output from the plug hole. Now, if you think about that in regards to carbon, it's very much the same principle. To keep that bath water level, it is all to do with the input and the output. So reaching net zero is exactly the same principle, requiring the balance of the amount of greenhouse gases that you emit to be offset by the amount that you remove. And that for me was a really cool and interesting way of how you describe what net zero means. It's very much a balance between what you're putting in and what you're taking out. As we know, for those of you watching in the UK, we have a net zero target by 2050. They've just recently enshrined a new target to reduce emissions by 78% by 2035. That's a very ambitious target, which is great for those people that are in the field of green technology. For those people who are watching who are FM businesses, please keep this in mind. Your clients will start to come to you, if they haven't already, talking about what does net zero mean for them and how can you help them. And so the best way to think about this is how do you help your clients hit their targets, but from a very credible and robust way. And I'll talk about target setting in a minute because we have to be very careful with that. A little bit of context. So the planet is getting hotter. We can talk and we can speculate. I've no doubt that there will be people watching this who believe that the planet is warming naturally. There'll be people believing that we are causing the problem. However we see fit to describe this, the planet is getting hotter and the science is there to prove that. Now, we need to think about this in the wider context as well. Now, when we think about climate change, it's very easy to think about climate change in your own world because we are very polarized in that way. It's very easy to do that. It's difficult to think of it as a macro level. But think about it from a world level. There are a lot of people living very close to shorelines, and just a very small change in the sea levels is catastrophe for them. And it's very difficult for us to think. I mean, I'm in Leeds in the UK, so if I flood, then there's some real problems elsewhere because I'm quite high up. But for those people that are living near at sea level, these are very, very, very poignant conversations, and it should be as well because that's their livelihoods. That's everything to them. But it's also important to put into context that this stuff takes time. It does take time. I mean, that for me was a very powerful quote that I found, that if we cut emissions now, if we stopped emissions now, they'll continue to rise until the year 2100. Now that is a massive lag effect of what we do now. It's easy to get disenfranchised with that and think, "Oh, what can I do? I might not be around by 2100." But think about it from a point of view of what will you be leaving for the next generation, and how will your legacy be left if you are not seen to be doing anything with this. It is very important, but we need to remember that this stuff does take time. Now, it's easy when you see everything in the media, pressure from maybe wider stakeholders, be that internally to your organization, externally to your organization, to rush and set targets. Now, you need to be careful with that, because you don't want to rush and set targets too early before you've had the time to evaluate your operation. Just please, 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 just think about your own business, find out what's going on. And I'll talk about that in a second, before you then rush to set targets. Because once your targets are set, the cat is very much out of the bag. They're there in the public domain, and people can and will scrutinize those targets. You don't want to be sat in a shareholders meeting or in any sort of meeting when you have scrutinization of your targets and you don't have a plan of how you're going to hit them. That's quite embarrassing, but also it lacks credibility into the organization. So be very careful when you're setting your targets. Think about it very carefully, because once they are out, they're out, and you will be left on a hook to deliver against them. The age also, how do you eat an elephant? Well, a little bit at a time. And this is very much similar to the slide I just mentioned around 2100. So setting targets, delivering on those targets, getting those emissions down, it can take time, but you can see some very quick gains as a result of very simple metrics that you can put into place in your operation. And if you think about those targets as a whole, as a country, as a world, even in your own organization, nibbling those targets bit by bit, you can actually have quite a big feast, which in this case is an elephant. Now, you might be sat there thinking, I'm confused. I don't get all this. I don't understand net zero. I don't understand how it works. I don't understand how I set my targets. I don't understand where I need to begin. And as we always say in MKL Innovation, you have just got to start. And I'm talking about this from an energy point of view. So if we leave the ESG, the wider ESG debate to one side at the moment and just talk around energy, you've just got to start. Now, you might be thinking, well, what do you mean by just start? And just start is very much looking at your own world. So what is happening in your business? You might be a business where you have one building or hundreds of buildings or thousands of buildings. You might be in the fortunate position to be an FM business where you're looking after very prominent clients, and they have big operations as well, because you have very much a relationship with those clients and you can really implement change. But think about it from your world to begin with. And then once you sort your world out, your house out, then we can start to look wider afield. The show me methodology always works really well for us. And what I mean by that is when you talk about energy conservation, understanding what's going on in your building from an energy point of view, just being able to see how energy comes into your building and then moves around your building from an asset level is immensely powerful. I recently posted a picture on LinkedIn showing a very interesting graph that I was very happy with. Client of ours, we put in an energy management system into their operation, and just by showing the client how much energy they were using, they made some very small tweaks to their operation. More importantly, their equipment, which wasn't necessarily optimized to the occupancy of the building, and the results speak for themselves. They reduced their energy output by 30%. 30% by just showing them. And this isn't about fancy integration, interoperability, visualizing BMS systems. That hasn't even come into the equation yet. This is just taking the energy as it comes into the building and showing the client how that energy moves around their building, and then how individual assets are performing with that energy. And that's all done with CT clips. It's not that hard to do. But be careful of fantasy. It's very easy to be romanticized by technology companies around the future. I mean, we should always look to the future. We really should. If you think 2050 isn't that long away, it really isn't. And you could look at your operation and think, I want a building that looks like it's a Starship Enterprise, and I could put someone on the moon. And that is absolutely fantastic to do. And you should, if you've got a big enough estate, you should have those green build sites where you can test technology out. But don't fall for the fantasy of thinking that that is going to be your operation within the next 5 to 10 years. It just won't. Start with a realistic point of view of looking at your buildings and taking those buildings that are probably the least sexy of your buildings. So legacy sites or sites that maybe have not had the investment that other sites have had for various reasons. Those will be your richest hunting ground for optimization, because once you start to show your people, your people in terms of maintenance who look after that building, be that your FM or be that yourselves, how that energy moves around those legacy sites. It's quite scary but refreshing when you see that, because you will see the volume of wastage. And then when you start to put your changes in place, you can then bank those savings. And this is a very important point. Now, it's easy once you've set your targets and you run off and then start to do things around the operation. So I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that, I'm going to put that behavioral change in, I'm going to put that poster up, etc. Great. But before you do anything, you need to put monitoring equipment in, because what's the point if you don't? What's the point in changing or trying to build a business case to move from incandescent lighting to LED? Now, we know that the financial benefits will be there, but I would rather base that change on science rather than a hunch or just assuming that I know that those savings are going to be there. So if you have a building that's got a lot of incandescent lighting, put in an energy management system, which isn't that expensive, and then change one area to LED, and then you watch the ROIs. But that is all banked savings, both from a carbon and energy point of view. You then take that to your CFO. It's a very different debate. Now, not only are you saving a ton of cash as a result of changing the lighting, you're also benefiting your net zero targets by taking carbon. I mean, think about that bathtub analogy as well. So you're still lighting the building, so your inputs are still there from an energy intake point of view, but you are emitting less as a result of the change of the lighting, but you're able to bank those savings and show them to the world. And that's probably one of the most important things, is talking about success. So once you've set your targets, you're happy with your targets, you then have equipment in place to monitor those targets and then bank those learnings. Shout about it, talk to people about it, tell people how good you're doing or where you've got challenges as well. We don't like big, heavy case studies in MKL. I find them quite boring, to be being honest. What we prefer is to use TikTok. So we make really fun and engaging 60-second videos with music around some of the installs that we do from a technology point of view. We even do it from a traditional electrical point of view as well. But that is what really grabs people's attention. So, of course, we could write 3,000-word essays of the nuances of how we've saved a client 30%. Of course, we could do that. And some people do like that. But what we found is the vast majority of people love those 60-second videos that really engage people and talk to people about what's going on. I did a live a couple of days ago around TikTok, where I spoke about a very interesting concept that I've got, calling TikTok the new elevator pitch. Now, if you're going to try to get your net zero agenda off the ground in your organization, find a small project where you can get some good success. Again, make sure you've got monitoring equipment in before you do this. Bank those learnings, take the savings, but make it fun and engaging as to what you're doing. And then stick that under the nose of your CEO or senior management. And you watch how engaging they will be with this, rather than going, here's a 5,000-word essay, let's talk about net zero. Because in the nicest sense of the word, most people will go, oh, right, I know I need to do this, but let's just get on and do it. Talk about it from the savings, the carbon you're taking out, the money you're saving. Let's not forget that you are saving tons of cash, tons of cash by doing this. And I don't mean you have to invest hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds in new equipment. You can do this by just visualizing your energy. You can save a fortune just by visualizing your energy. And then you will know if a piece of equipment does need an actual rip and replace rather than a digitalization route, because you will know how efficient that piece of equipment is performing because you are seeing how the energy moves around. It really isn't that difficult. It is quite straightforward, but all you need to do is start. But please, before you do, put monitoring equipment in. Monitoring equipment in, bank those learnings, and then shout about them to the world in very fun and engaging ways. I'm just going to finish this live by talking about our new podcast. We do these podcasts every Wednesday, 9 a.m. We talk about weird and wonderful areas, books, skydiving, cars, everything in between. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, either reach out to myself or Sharon Boyd. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're everywhere. And you can come on and you can talk about anything. It doesn't have to be about work. You could talk about ballet. I don't know where I pulled that from. You talk about anything. We are people who love to be educated, so we will ask very direct and straightforward questions. But if you've got a topic you want to come on and chat about and tell the world, just come and have a chat with us. We stream our podcasts over the channels that we are now. So Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. But we also are on Anchor, so that pushes the podcast out to Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify as well, and I think there's some other channels, which you'll find them on our Instagram. So we are very much everywhere with the podcast, and I'd like to just finish it there. So if you have any questions around net zero, please reach out to us. I'm happy to help. As I said, it's not that scary. All you've got to do is start, but find out what's going on in your operation first. Get those targets set, get that monitoring equipment in, get those early wins under your belt, make it engaging for people, and you just watch how your operation changes. Have a great day.